of the
Yeah.
weather. So we got based on the report for tomorrow, bring your umbrellas, bring your winter coats. We're gonna be outside.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Uh,
So at least we'll have some good stories to tell about this wedding. But
Yes.
I'm sure it'll be beautiful, even if it's a little cold and wet. Um,
Yeah.
well, it may mean they'll have 10 children, you know.
it
Yes,
might
decision.
is that a segula for 10 children? Chuppah in the
Well,
rain.
it's the gula for a lot of fertility all around, I think.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I wanted to today we're this week is Parshat Vayeitze. Vayeitze is really the from Vayeitze till the end of Sefer Breshit, we're going to be focused on Yaakov and his family. Started last week with the taking of the birthright, the tricking of his father to get the bracha, and his sort of beginning of the running away, the very end of last week's parsha. And this week we read in earnest about Yaakov's experience, adventure, trials in the house of Lavan, and the building of his family. By the end of the parsha, 11 of the 12 Shvatim are born, and Yaakov will be the center point from here on out. Um, and in the midst of what happens in pretty rapid succession in the Torah's telling of us, the building of the family, um, we come across a rather troubling, interesting, provocative exchange. And that's what I wanted to focus on tonight. Um, so, right, remember, Yaakov goes, he encounters Rachel at the well. He's immediately smitten by her. He comes to the home. He offers or wants, says he would like to marry her. Lavan, the father, his uncle, says, "Sure, better she marry you than someone else." The unclear, depending on which commentary you follow, if it's right away or if he works a full 7 years beforehand. Um, the day of the wedding comes. We're not told if it was raining or an outdoor chuppah. And but behold, when he's the sisters are switched on him. He thought he was marrying Rachel. He winds up with Leah. He gets very upset. Commits to work for an additional 7 years in order to marry Rachel. And again, most it seems that even though he was committed to now work another 7 years, that the actual marriage took place pretty quickly thereafter. Um, and after, he's married, he has two wives, and Leah is extremely fertile, and Rachel is not. Rachel struggles to have children. Eventually, she offers, well, we'll see. She offers her maidservant to Yaakov. Maybe she'll have children through her. But this is where we pick up in the story. We're in chapter 30, verse 1. Vatera Rachel, Kilo Yalada, is the source sheet zoomed in enough?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So Rachel sees that she was not able to have children. But tikane Rachel ba'achota, v'tomer Yaakov havali vanim, v'im meta anochi. Rachel becomes jealous of her sister, and she says to Yaakov, "Give me children, and if not, I will die." Vaychar af Yaakov berachel. Yaakov gets very angry at her, and he says, "Vayomer hatachat Elokim anochi, asher manami nech privaten." He says, "Am I in the place of God, who has denied you children?" Vatomer hine amati bilha boeleha vatelet al birki. So Rachel says, in response to this, take my maidservant Bilhah and marry her, and she will have children al birki on my with my blessing by my knees. Unclear how to translate that phrase, but I will be, my name, or I will build up from her. Vatitin lo et Bilhah shivchata l'isha v'yovei la Yaakov. So Yaakov agrees. He takes Bilhah Atar Bilha Vatelu Yaakov ben, and Bilha becomes pregnant and has a son. Tomer Rachel Danani Elokim. So Rachel names this child Dan based on the favorable or the judgment that was passed over her. Atar Od Bilha Shivchat Rachel ben Sheni Yaakov, and Bilha has a second son, Naphtali. And then Leah sees that now she's not behind because she's already had four children with Yaakov, but she sees that Rachel is catching up, I guess, and so she gives Yaakov her maidservant also, and so a lot of drama in Yaakov's household, to say the least. Um, but so the first couple verses that we just read, Rachel says to Yaakov, "Havali banim, v'im ayin meta anochi." Give me children, and if not, I will die. So I don't want to focus on this, but it would be disingenuous to at least not mention the Gemara in Avodah Zarah that quotes this passage. And the Gemara says, right, it's counting different people that are considered as if they're dead. So one such person is a Mitzoras, a leper, um, a blind person, and the Gemara says, Misha ein lo banim, someone who does not have children, dichtiv havali banim v'im meta anochi. As it says, quoting Rachel, give me children or else I am dead. Okay, so there certainly is that trope in the tradition um, that sees having children as the be all and end all. And that seems to, among other sources, this story, this exchange clearly is one of the sources that shape it. The Akedat Yitzchak goes on the opposite extreme. I'll display the English and try to read most of the Hebrew. So the Akedat Yitzchak is talking about the various names that Adam gives to his wife, right? Isha, Nekeva, and Chava. So he says that there's multiple names given. Vayikra Adam et Ishto Chava. Adam calls his wife Chava. Rishona, kishera'a ota etzem me'atzma v'basar mibasaro, gazar la efsharut lishtatef b'shleimuta enoshi. Originally, when Eve or woman was created, and Adam saw that she was, literally just like him. She came from his flesh and blood, and he saw that she had the potential to join with him in the completion or the perfecting of humanity. Ke'achad ha'adam v'kara ota isha, right? And that's where the name Isha comes from. Omnam. אחר שראה מה שנמשך לו בחברתה מהרה והקבלה חזר ונקבה ונקבה בשם אחר המורה לנקבות לבד והיא חווה. But after the sin with the fruit from the tree of knowledge and the curse which God places upon her, he's more sensitive, I guess, to her femininity, right? So we even before they sin, right? We see that no, right? So that right, both in terms of sort of sexual desire, but also in terms of the biological capacity for reproduction. And so he calls her a second name, which emphasizes her femininity, and that name is Chava. Moshe Piresh v'Amar ki Haita im kol chai, as it says when he gives her the name Chava, that she was the mother of all living things. Klomar she'ein ikar kavanato basher hi ishto, which is to say that his main focus with that name isn't that she was his wife, which I think the Akedat Yitzchak is reading as his equal, rak lahashir hamin, but rather that he sees her purely in biological sense in order to perpetuate the species. Kishar Balei Chaim, just like all other animals. Aval be'inyane hashlamatam hakol mutal alav levado. But when it comes to sort of interacting with the world, in this moment, he sees it as all falling on him. Right, the emphasis is on the woman being the mother, being the one who's going to have children. So with these two names, we see that women I think we can say man also, but that woman has two different and distinct functions or purposes. Echad masha yoreh alav shem isha ki meish lukacha zot v'kamohu tuchal lahavinu laskil b'divrei seicha v'chasidut kemo she'asu ha'imahot u'bekama tidkaniot v'neviot. Right. So the first function, the first purpose is indicated by the name Isha, right, which means that she was taken from man, and therefore, as he's reading it, she is an equal to man, and therefore she can understand, she can intellectualize, um, just like the matriarchs did, and like other righteous women throughout history has have done. The Kasher Yoreh Pshat Parshat Eshet Chayil, right, and as we see in the chapter of Mishlei of Eshet Chayil, Kimoshe Yavo Sha'ar um, okay, right. That there the woman is praised as being very worldly and very involved in all aspects of society and of life. V'hasheni inyan haholada. And the second purpose, the second function is that of childbirth. V'heyota kli eleha umutvaat el haleda v'gidul habanim. Right, and that women have a again, we can agree or disagree, but right, he's saying that women have a natural disposition towards motherhood and towards child rearing. Kasher yoreh Hashem Chava, and that's indicated by the name Chava. Kasher hi haita im kol chai, being that she was the mother of all life. V'hinei tia isha kasher lo teled l'siba mehasibot minua mehatachlit hakatan hahi. So if a woman is not right, doesn't have the role of mother, if she's not married, if she's unable to conceive, if she, for whatever reason, she is not able, or she does not take on the role of mother, right? Which he says is the secondary, or the smaller of these two purposes. Um, Tishaer lahara oleitiv kemo ha'ish. So she still can do bad or do good, just like man. Asher lo yolid ki behashlim atzmo beoto hatachlit. Right? Men don't give birth. Obviously, they're required and essential to create children, but they don't give birth. And so men, right? Men have, they achieve, they go about interacting in the world. Um, המשותף להם נאמר, ואל יאמר הסריסין אני איש יבש. He quotes the pasuk from Yeshayahu that the eunuch should not say, I am a dried up tree with no purpose. ונאמר, נתתי להם בביתי וחמותי יד ושם טוב. And God responds that to the eunuch, to the man, to the sterile man, I will give in them in my house and within my walls, yad vashem tov, the hand and a good name, better than sons and daughters. Kivadai ikar todoteim shel tzadikim maasim tovim. Because certainly the main contribution, the main purpose for the righteous is to do good deeds. Al Kain, and so now he brings in our story. Al Kain chara af Yaakov berachel. This is why Yaakov gets so angry at Rachel. Kishamra havali banim, when she says, "Give me children, and if not, I will die." Right? He gets very angry at her in order, according to the Akedat Yitzchak, to teach her. Right? She shouldn't see herself or think that she is dead or without life or without purpose. Right? Even though God has withheld from you children, you still have this lofty purpose and this lofty goal and this lofty capacity in life, to contribute and to play a part in perfecting of the world and completing society. Right. So again, there's a lot here that to our 21st century sensibility is perhaps offensive, sexist, not exactly in the most politically correct, as far as essentializing, as far as roles of men and women. But he is, right, making a very interesting point that a man or woman should not see the be all and end all in having children, but that and he even goes so far as to say that child rearing is sort of a secondary or minor task, and the main contribution that every person, man and woman, can make and should make is in trying to bring about shleimut and trying to bring about completion and perfection. And so the question I didn't make so explicit, but I hope is was rather obvious, is right, what explains Yaakov's harsh reaction to Rachel's request? Why does Yaakov get so angry at her? So the Akedat Yitzchak, he gets so angry at her because she fails to see that there's more to life and more that she's able to achieve. It's not right. Certainly, it's not about keeping up with her sister, right? More broadly speaking, keeping up with the Joneses, and that a person only sees success if they relative to everyone else, but that there is lofty purpose and goal um, regard for every not dependent on marriage, not dependent on children. Each person as an individual has much to contribute to the world. That's the Akedat Yitzchak. Any questions or thoughts on this?
I couldn't help but notice that because of your wonderful pursuits last week and in your Devar Torahs over the last couple of weeks, speaking about prayer and the power of prayer, that the Rashis on these two verses also, well, he had four daughters. I mean, maybe the subject came up there too, who
Yeah,
knows?
right.
Maybe they weren't too happy about these passages either. But anyway, he makes the suggestion that she was saying to Yaakov, why aren't you praying the way your father Yitzchak prayed?
Right,
You know,
right.
and with the yatar, the piercing fork that wants to overturn a very difficult situation, or the pleading was the translation. Okay. Well, that word pleading comes up in this translation because of Naphtali, but I'll get there in a moment. I thought that
Okay,
was a very interesting irony. Um, but his rejoinder to her is, according to Rashi, he how can you compare me to my father? He felt justified in praying to God because he was childless. I, however, have children.
right,
He has
right.
denied you children, not me, right? That whole line of thought. So he was driving her, some would say, to do her own praying. And it turns out that she named Naphtali because, and if we look at the form of the word, we see that it is a very strong form of the word for tefillah, actually, with in a different stem altogether. So it's a very intense kind of a word that refers to working very hard at prayer, which also some would translate as pleading. So she
Yeah.
wound up being the pleader. So that is a way to take perhaps some of the harshness off of the
Okay, and
verses.
we'll see some other sources that play with this idea as well. But right, so Anne notes that Rashi said, and we'll come to this, but Rashi notes that right, Yaakov perhaps is angry that she expects he's going to be the one to pray and have his prayers answered, and it should be Rachel who prays on her own. If this is, if this is what she wants, but also that I think in previous years we might have talked about. The trap of thinking that the rabbi is the one who offers prayers on behalf of people, right? This is not the Catholic Church. Every individual is capable and expected to pray for themselves, and she shouldn't
Right.
rely on the prayers of someone else. Um, okay, all right. Let's move on a little bit. The Or HaChaim makes a very important point, and this is one which I think also is very relevant in our day and age. The Or HaChaim says as follows. Vayichar af, again explaining why Yaakov gets so angry. Hatam, lefisha hotzia mipia dvar klala, she'amra meta anochi. The reason he gets so angry is because of the language that she uses. She says, I will die, right? And so the Ohr HaChaim, as most of us assume, she doesn't literally mean I will die, but that she's using it to really shock him and to show just how extreme her desire is. Um, and so he says Yaakov gets upset because she uses this language, right? And I think that we often, and right in modern day English, we often use this phrase, right? If I don't get this, if this doesn't happen, you know, I could die, you know. So that we have to be very, very careful, right? And there's certainly a sensitivity nowadays to any even any TV show, any podcast, any radio broadcast where there is even a mention of death or certainly a mention of suicide that right that they always have to flag it and say this may be difficult for some listeners, right? But that we have to be very, very careful with the language that we use, especially with with treating lightly or treating perhaps less seriously than we should ideas of life and death. And so the Ohr HaChaim says that Yaakov gets angry at her because of the harsh language that she uses. Right? So the words of a tzaddik, the right make make a lasting impression. Seyumad, um, right? Whatever. I didn't bring the whole thing, but right, but there are midrashim that say that one there is a midrashic tradition that says Rachel's early death was partially due to her declaration here, right? Yaakov, of course, right, said whoever stole the statues is going to die, right? That's the end of our parsha. But there are though also traditions that connect her early and tragic death in the during the birth of Binyamin to this statement that she made. And so the Ohr HaChaim is saying we have to be very, very careful with our language, and we can't take we can't use our language just for shock value. We have to take what we say what we hear very seriously. So I think that's an important source. Any questions or thoughts on that one?
There's the English expression, I'm dying to do something. There are people who are
Yeah,
dying to go
yeah,
skating, dying to go fishing, dying to go to the movies.
yep.
It's an intensifier. They don't really mean,
No.
We certainly
but
hope not. Correct.
that it's a way of intensifying the statement. I
Yeah,
want to.
yeah. Okay,
Being
so
very dramatic about it.
yeah, the Radak and the Ramban follow, to take a similar approach. The Radak says as follows: Asher manami nech, right? Yaakov says, Hatachat Elohim anochi, Asher manami nech pi betenim. I in the place of God who denied you children. So Asher manami nech, right? Who denied you? Hu manami mimech velo ani. God is the one who has denied you and not me. Mimenu tivakesh sheitin lach manim, right? So this is along the lines of what Rashi said. You should ask from God that He should give you children. He says, I meet all my marital responsibilities, all my conjugal responsibilities to you. It's not. I'm doing my part. V'im at akara mehael, and if God has declared or decreed that you are infertile, tivakshi shivtach et richmech. So you should ask God to open your womb. Kasher asal achotech b'vakasha mimenu, as he did for your sister when she asked for it. Hamaniyahi milatahi the hamaniyahi milatet harayon b'ftoach haretem, right? The denial to give pregnancy by opening the womb. Leficha chara'af Yaakov lefisha talta hakoach bo velo ba'el. Right, so Yaakov gets upset because she thought that it was that he had the power to open her womb to help her get pregnant, and in asking Yaakov, she was denying God's responsibility, God's hand here. Asher lo hakoach vayacholet ad akara yalda shiva. Right? God has the power to make the barren woman fertile. V'hi amra havali banim, and she says to Yaakov, "Give me children." Aval im amra bakesh rachamim alai sadka b'ma'amara. Had she instead said, "Please pray to God for me, please ask for him on my behalf," then it would have been a justified request. So not exactly like Rashi, but pretty similar to, right? Similar ideas what Rashi is expressing, that Rachel seems to be giving Yaakov too much credit or too much power in all of this. Okay, so the Ramban, right, similar, but expands it a little bit. Ramban says, "Vaychar af Yaakov." Yaakov was angry. She'ein tfilat tzadikim biyadam shetishama b'te'aneh al kol panim. He says that, right, even for the most righteous of people, prayer is not like going to the store with guaranteed result. If you daven, if you put the money in the cash register, then you're guaranteed to get whatever it is that you were asking for. Uba'avor shedibra derech ga'aguei hanashim ha'ahavot lahavchido b'mitata hara'apo. Right. So since she spoke, again, not the most politically correct, but she spoke with the longing of women who love to instill fear by referencing their deaths, he got angry. And therefore Yaakov responds harshly to her that he is not in the place of God who can, I guess we'll say, reverse infertility. He's not so concerned that the denial was to her and not to him. Right, but he was really interested in teaching her this important lesson. So Rachel gets the point, gets the message. When she sees that she cannot rely on the prayer of Yaakov, she returns and prays on her own behalf. V'zehu vayishma Elokim eleha. A little bit later in our chapter, it says God heard her, and she eventually does conceive and gives birth to Yosef. Right? And he says it's inconceivable that Yaakov would not have davened, would not have prayed for his beloved wife. Rather, his prayers weren't answered. And now, right, he's been praying ardently for Rachel to have children. His prayers aren't answered, and now she's making it worse by pestering him and saying, I want you to give me children. Kilono felhu me'aviv achshav, right? And so Shasakin, so he's no different than his father who davened on behalf of Rivka to have children. And that's why Yaakov gets so angry, because he was praying. He was asking God to give her children, and he wasn't answered. And so when she asks him again and sort of is emphasizing the fact that he hasn't been successful in his prayers up until now, that's what gets him angry. Okay. So again, right, it's I think a theologically correct explanation of the Ramban, that Yaakov is frustrated because he has been praying for Rachel, and he both is feeling that frustration and also wanting her to recognize that his his prayers aren't. She shouldn't be relying on him. That if she really this is something that she wants, she should be praying directly to Hashem. So theologically correct. In
Is
Rafersh,
this story where the prayer comes for children?
is this where the prayer? Which prayer for? I mean, what when you say the prayer
I
for
think the
children?
sitter has a prayer for a woman to pray if she's trying to conceive. No?
Um, I mean, there's many prayers and many stories that women reference. I'm not if you're referencing a specific prayer, I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with it. But we
Okay.
certainly, in like in the Rosh Hashanah davening, right? We talk about all the infertile women who were remembered and were able to have children.
Mhm.
Rachel's not mentioned, right? We
Okay.
mentioned Sarah, we mentioned
Oh, how
Hannah.
come my sitter?
Okay.
Some,
Um, okay. And so Rav Hirsch sort of, completes this train of thought. Havala banim, give me children. She probably thought that as he was getting children anyway from Leah, he did not very much mind her being barren, and consequently was not sufficiently ardent in beseeching God for her. Right? So she thinks, okay, Yaakov already is a father, so maybe he doesn't feel it as desperately that he should have children with me as well. Yaakov responds back, Atachat Hashem Anochi, it is not through lack of prayer on my part, but God has denied you the joy of motherhood. Because I am praying for you. I do desperately want for you to have children as well, but there's nothing more that I can do, or nothing more that he can envision himself doing in order to bring that about. Okay, so that's one school of thought, right? One school of thought is that again we can question the tone of voice that we imagine Yaakov responding back to Rachel, and we can question the attitude, but that at least from a theological perspective, he's absolutely correct. She should be davening for herself. She shouldn't be relying on him. B, that from a biological, physical perspective, there's zero reason to think that there is any fault in him, as he has fathered several children already, um, and that he's not. It's not up to him. It's up to God. Right, so that's sort of one school of thought in unpacking this and explaining Yaakov's anger, is that he's angry. Really, we could say maybe in defense of God, right? That he's or trying to teach a religious, spiritual, theological lesson here. The Medrash Rabbah takes us in a different direction. Okay. So it quotes a pasuk from Eov, and it says, Vaychar af Yaakov berachel. Let me get the English up for you. Quotes our verse. Yaakov's wrath was inflamed at Rachel. He was angry at her. He said, sorry, Amar lo Kadosh Baruch Hu. God says to Yaakov, Kach onim et hameikot. Is this how you answer the distressed? Right? Is this how you answer someone who's in crisis, someone who's distressed, someone who's troubled? Chayecha shebanecha atidim la'amod lifnei bina. So I swear to you that in the end, it's a little bit ironic, but that your children will stand in trepidation, in judgment, in inferiority before her children, right? Referencing, of course, that the brothers are going to bow down to Yosef. Of course, Yosef is his son also, so it's a little bit ironic, but that you will in some way be punished for this insensitive response that that you said to her. So the Met, right, and then it continues, and this is where I think Rashi is taking much of his commentary from. Vayomer hatachat Elokim anochi. So Yaakov says, and Yaakov continues and says to her, "Am I in the place of God? Asher manami nech bibaten, who has denied you children? Mimech mana mimeni lo mana. He denied you, but not me." Amra lo kach asa avicha leimcha. So she says back to him, "Well, your father prayed for your mother to have children." Um, Lo chagar matnav kenegda, and he didn't get angry at her. Amar la avi lo haya lo banim, aval ani yesh li banim. He says, well, my father, as Anne said, was also childless at the time when he davened for Rivka. I already have many children. Again, there seems to be nothing wrong on my end. Amra lo zakinecha lo haya lo banim. She says, well, what about Avraham, your grandfather? He had Yishmael, and he davens on behalf of Sarah. V'chagar matnav keneged Sarah. Amar la yichola at lasot kashem shasta zakenti. So he says, well, you can daven just like Sarah, my grandmother davened. Amar lo me'asta. Amar lo hichnisa tzarata letoch beita. Okay, so what did she do? Well, she brought in her adversary into her home. She encouraged Avraham to marry Hagar. And that's why Rachel gives Bilhah to Yaakov in marriage as well. Okay, but the Medrash is taking the Medrash is finding the fault in Yaakov. Yaakov, even if you're technically, philosophically, theologically right that this is something that, treating infertility as God's domain and not your domain, why were you such a jerk to Rachel, right? I mean, I think that's how you have to read it. Why did you respond so harshly to her? Right? She's clearly in distress. She's clearly suffering, and you should have been more sensitive to her. Let's go to the Sforno first, then we'll come back to the Gemara and Ketubot. The Sforno. The Sforno says as follows: Vayichar, he was angry. Al amra havali kilu haya biado lasot zeh. Right, when she says "give me children," which implies that it was within his capacity to decide to do it. V'ka'as b'kinato lichlod kono, and he got angry in his zealousness for God. Lo hibit la'avato ota b'zeh, and he disregarded, or he put aside, he ignored his love for her. Right, I think that Rabbi Pelkovitz, who wrote the English translation of the Sforno, says it beautifully. His great zeal for God's honor caused him to set aside his feelings of love for Rachel, for his love of God was greater. Okay, so that we can take that in either a very positive way or a very negative way, right? We could see that, as the Medrash does, that yes, it's good to be frum, and it's important to be frum and to have a great love of God, but that doesn't excuse mistreatment of humans, especially of the humans that you love, especially of your beloved wife. Or we could read it as as praise for Yaakov, that he, despite his great love for Rachel, he recognized that his relationship with God was superior. I think I know, I can't remember when, but I know that we've quoted a ruling brought in the Shulchan Aruch by the Ramah it's in Orach Chaim Tzadi Chet, where the Ramah says, I'm sorry this wasn't on the source sheet. I thought I had it there, and then I already printed it and realized I had forgotten to include it. But the Shulchan Aruch says, Asur la'adam linashek banav haktanim beveit hakneset. It is forbidden for a person to kiss his small children in shul, in synagogue. Kedei likboa belibo she'ein ahava ke'avat hamakom baruch hu. In order to establish in his heart that there is no love like the love for God. It's a little bit ambiguous if it means to say in order to establish in the parent's heart, or in order to establish in the kid's heart. but that we have this halacha which is very harif, is very harsh, very sharp, which says you shouldn't kiss your children in shul, because in shul your focus has to be on your relationship with God and not on your family relationship. Now, many poskim say that this is maybe this is true in a theoretical sense, but on a practical sense, and certainly in a generation like, I think this has been true for many generations, but certainly in our generations where we struggle and we have to put in great effort in order to ensure that our children will remain from and committed to Judaism, that this is not the proper message, and that we should make shul a place with only positive associations, and we should make shul a place where children
Seforno,
certainly
excuse me, I'm sorry.
certainly where children feel the love of God, but also where children feel the love of their parents and of their community, and that perhaps this is a halacha that best be left unsaid and perhaps unpracticed in our day and age. Go ahead, Arthur.
From what Seforno said, it seems like Yaakov, his thoughts were good, but his actions were not.
Yeah, I mean, again,
He,
everyone agrees that from a theological perspective, what he's saying is true and is correct, right? Theologically, it is not in his capacity, right? This is, miraculous medical intervention. Thank God we have doctors that are able to play a part in it, but even doctors with the modern technology and knowledge that we have, doctors are, it's God's decision. God plays a crucial role in providing, in medical intervention, certainly in where, odds and the probabilities are not in one's favor. And when there is a miraculous healing, a miraculous turn of events, we have to recognize that that comes from God. We have to do our part. We have to treat it. We have to take the medicine. We have to, eat a healthy diet, whatever our part is in whatever ailment, whatever condition we're talking about. But that ultimately it is up to God. But that is a theological fact. But we also have to treat people with empathy, right? And if someone is suffering, and if they haven't merited God's intervention, and they're suffering and they're in pain, then we have to be able to empathize with their pain and with their suffering where they are. And then that's sort of what the balance is that's being brought out here. At the very beginning of the shir, we'll come back to the Gemara and Ketubot in a moment, but just at the very beginning of the shir, I can't even find it now. In the chat, I don't know if everyone was signed in. Where's the chat? Here it is. I think if I post it again, you'll all be able to see it. Literally today. So after the source sheet was prepared, after everything was ready, again, not a tremendous chiddush, not a tremendous novel insight, but a very powerful podcast, The Orthodox Conundrum. If you're into podcasts, I think this one was very worthwhile to listen. It was part 2 of a follow-up podcast talking about parents of children who are gay and lesbian, LGBTQ, and both how parents can be supportive and can Orthodox parents of their children who come out, and how the community can be supportive, and very much playing on this exact tension, right? This again, it's not the only example. It's just a powerful one that's very much on my mind because I listened to it today. It felt like it was Bashert, but very powerful about this tension, about living with our halachic, theological, philosophical truths. How do we continue to show love and support for people that aren't necessarily following, step for step in that path? right? And the same is true for children that are no longer or not observant in the same way as their parents to children. With teenagers nowadays, everyone's talking about kids who are on their phones all during Shabbos, and whatever the case is, we can think of lots and lots of areas where we or our children or our families fall short of proper halachic observance, and how we react and how we continue to show love and support is a very important thing. And I think that's what's being highlighted in this exchange between Yaakov and Rachel. So again, if podcast is your thing, if you're if that's something that you're interested in and do, I thought this was a worthwhile listen to.
There is another issue, though,
Yeah,
from the side of Hasidus, and that is that we tend to see Abraham as the one who has the midah of Hesed, of giving love freely,
right,
perhaps too much in some cases, but it's over there on one of the two sides of the representations of the Sefirot, meaning that it has to have a limit, it's a healthy limit in some way. And then that Yitzchak is the one who is able to restrain himself and therefore is strong and disciplined.
right,
But also that's over kind of on a side, meaning that also has to be warmed, done with love too. But in the middle, that's considered to be the line of the kav of the Ein Sof. This is a more direct way to imitate Hashem, and there is Yaakov, and his midah is compassion. And obviously, this is hard to see where the compassion is here,
yeah,
when in fact he's acting more perhaps like somebody who is quick to anger, which there's a lot written about in the Pirkei Avos as well as lots of other places. So certainly it's clear that all of us have to develop whatever is the deepest one inside of us, but we have to balance them all
right.
and
And
try
so
our
if you say that
best, but
Abraham
we have
perhaps
to learn it. We have to learn
right,
it, and this is a lesson for him too.
and Yaakov, right? Yaakov is emes, right? Yaakov is so we would think that
Yes.
it's his so
And Teferet also
just
beauty,
like Abraham struggled,
harmony.
maybe Abraham showed too much love sometimes. So maybe, there's a message here that our essential mitos have to be curtailed to some extent also, that, simply speaking the truth without thinking about how that message is delivered or when it's appropriate to give that message also might be one of the things we can learn from here. Because
Right.
again, no one's denying that on a factual basis he's correct. Okay, so just very, very quickly, we're coming to the end of our time, but powerful story in the Gemara and Ketubot, which drives home this point. We're not going to do the entire thing, but this is the story of Rabbi Akiva, right? And Rabbi Akiva, in many ways, right? First of all, the name Akiva really is the Aramaic name Yaakov. So there are many parallels to Rabbi Akiva and Yaakov. But Rabbi Akiva, we know, came to observance, to religious life, to learning much later in life, when he was already an older man established. Right, he was the shepherd of this man called Basabua. Basabua's daughter sees that he has great potential. She says, "If I marry you, will you go and study Torah?" He says, "Fine." He goes. He studies for 12 years. After 12 years, he's on his way back to finally be with his wife and start building building a life together. And one of the neighbors, he overhears the neighbor saying to her, you're living like a widow. Your husband's been gone for 12 years. What's pshat? What's going on here? She says, if it was up to me, he would learn for another 12 years. I want him to master the Torah. So Rabbi Akiva hears this on his way back to the home. He's like, all right, I guess I got a hall pass, and he turns around, goes back to yeshiva for another 12 years. The end of the second 12 years, as the Gemara tells it, he returns with, now he has 24,000 students in total, and right, of course, these are the same students that all die during Sfirat HaOmer because they act disrespectfully to one another. Um, and so now Rabbi Akiva's wife is elated. Her husband's coming home. He's become everything that she wanted for him to be, a great rabbi with many, many students. And she runs out to greet him. She falls at his feet, and the students start pushing her aside. Who is this, disheveled, crazy, poor woman who's throwing herself at the feet of the great Rabbi Akiva? Rabbi Akiva um, says to the children, to the students, Shafkuha, leave her alone. Shali v'shelachem shelahu. Whatever is mine, whatever is yours, meaning whatever Torah I've acquired, whatever Torah I've passed on to you, it's all because of her. And so it's a wonderful, important story. But part of the message here, or part of what struck me, is that these are the students that we know die because they didn't treat each other respectfully, and that comes out so clearly here. That they don't need to know that this is Rabbi Akiva's wife, but you see a disheveled woman, a desperate woman, throwing herself at the feet of a rabbi, of a religious spiritual leader, right? The response should not be to push her aside because you think you're showing great kavod to the rabbi. The response should be to find out what it is that she wants and to treat her with a little respect and a little dignity. And the students failed to do that. And I thought that that was a very strong parallel to the way in which Yaakov responds to Rachel, right? And with this harsh critique, we see a continuation of that. I'm sure there's many other stories we can point to as well, because unfortunately, this is a problem that continues to be an issue. And then just one more point on this whole thing is, right, we saw the Medrash already, which said that because Yaakov acted so harshly and unkindly to Rachel, that in the end, his children will stand in judgment before her children. Again, his children, Yosef is his child as well. But we see a really interesting textual parallel, which Nechama Leibowitz points out in the story of Yosef and the brothers. So at the very, very end, after Yaakov dies, and they buried him, they return to Egypt because there's still a famine, and the brothers are afraid that maybe Yosef only acted kindly to them while Yaakov was still alive. But now that he's dead, Yosef is going to get revenge. And so they make up a story, they make up a lie. They tell Yosef, before he died, our father told us that you shouldn't take any revenge on us for what we did to you. And Yosef gets very upset, very sad. And it says, Vayomer Alehem Yosef, Al Tira'u. Yosef says to them, do not be afraid. Ki hatachat Elokim ani. For am I in the stead of God? Atem chashavtem alai ra'a, Elokim chashava letova. You plotted evil against me when you sold me into servitude, but God had a better plan and everything turned out for the good. But he uses the same exact language which Yaakov uses, hatachat Elokim ani. And in source number 11, Nechama Leibowitz just notes the contrast about how when Yaakov uses this phrase of hatachat Elokim anochim, am I in the place of God? He had spurned her request by pointing to the limits of his ability in the matter. But this belittling of himself was motivated simply by a desire to cover up his unwillingness to help in order to relieve himself of responsibility. Joseph, on the other hand, had proffered these words to his frightened and dismayed brothers after their father's death, who had come to ask his forgiveness and pardon for all they had done to him. He had reassuringly answered them with the words, "Fear not, can I take the place of God?" Joseph likewise recognized his limitations, but this belittling of himself had come to prove to his brothers and himself that judgment did not belong to him in his relations with them, but to God. So again, both stories are saying the same theological truth, that no matter what we do, nothing is in our control. So you can ask forgiveness, you can ask, for my help in praying or for beseeching. It's not going to make any difference, right? Everything is in the hands of God. We have to do our part. We have to put in our effort. But the way that message is delivered is is very important as well. And so Yaakov failed to deliver the message in a compassionate, empathetic way, whereas Yosef was successful. And so again, as we, it's universal in all generations that there will be these tensions. There will be times when our religious lives are pitted against our family loyalties, our society, our communal loyalties, and we have to remain true to who we are, but we have to do so in a way which is kind and empathetic, and to those around us, and certainly to those who we love. And so I think it's a really important story and insights into a universal thing that we all experience at one time or another. Final questions or thoughts? All right, so we'll say good night.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you so
Okay,
much.
thank you. So again, thank you for accommodating the Monday night this week. Next week, hopefully we'll be back on our normal Tuesday night schedule. No more conferences, no more interruptions. Please God, there'll be more smachot, and if we have to reschedule in the future, we will. But for the foreseeable future, we'll be back on Tuesday nights. Hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we'll see you on
Very good.
Shabbos.
Same for you and your family.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Safe trip.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
So
Laila
much.
Tov.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.